Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Hernandez, and I'm the Executive Director of the Legislature's Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity. We are here today to have a conversation together with the Trafficking in Persons Council around trafficking and the massage parlor industry. We are joined today by our co-hosts, Jillian Gilchrist and Robin Porter. I know that Robin was having some technical difficulties, but she will be joining us shortly. We are also joined by a panel, a very learned panel of practitioners in the field of anti-trafficking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have each of you introduce yourselves individually so that you can come to the front of the camera. And if you could just say your name, the organization that you represent, and then we can move on and have the substance of our presentation. So let's start. I'm going to call on you in the order in which I see you, and we can start with Courtney up top. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for having me. So my name is Investigator Courtney Desolate. I am an investigator with the East Hartford Police Department, and I also serve as a human trafficking liaison for Connecticut's Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team.
Thank you, Courtney. Nice to see you. Liz, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Liz Johnson. I'm the campaign director at Cortiva Institute, formerly CCMT, in Cromwell, and I also am a member of the Coalition of Estheticians in Connecticut.
Nice to see you, Liz. Hi, Ronald.
How you doing, Stephen? Thank you, Greg. My name is Ron Perry. I'm a retired New Haven police detective, and I do some consulting work around human trafficking. I currently coordinate and organize human trafficking awareness for our state.
Thank you, Ronald, and welcome. Hi, Anne-Marie.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Boulay. I'm with the Underground, Lighting a Way to Freedom. We are a faith-based initiative that seeks to serve frontline workers that are doing this great work in the anti-trafficking movement of rescuing victims and survivors. We provide awareness for the state. We provide prevention pieces to the state that give the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and we also do many direct support to victims and survivors. Glad to be here today.
That's great. Welcome, Anne-Marie. We also have members of the Trafficking in Persons Council who have joined us. I'm actually going to have each of you introduce yourselves. There are just a few of us here, but I'd like for the viewing public, those of you on Facebook Live and also on CTN, to see each of you. So first I'm going to turn to Yvette Young. You are next on my screen here. Welcome, Yvette. Please say who you are, the organization that you represent, and then we'll move on to the other presenters.
Hi, Yvette Young. I work for the Village for Families and Children. I was the former Human Anti-Traffic Response Team Coordinator with DCF. I am currently a co-chair for our HEART committee for the state.
Great, thank you, Yvette. Hi, Mary Stanley. I'll come back to you, Mary. You're muted, but Lucy, if we could have you introduce yourself and just the organization that you represent.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Lucy Nolan, and I'm with the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence.
That's great. Nice to see you, Lucy. Next, we have Emily Munson. Hi, Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Munson. I'm a reporter for Hearst Connecticut Media, and I'm joining the call because I did some reporting on human trafficking and massage parlors that culminated in a two-part piece that we published back in February. I'm looking forward to learning more today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily, and welcome. Emily's been doing good work good work following this work on trafficking. And one of the things that we're going to learn today is the use of the term massage parlors can sometimes be misleading, and we'll have some clarification there from some of our panelists. So, Mary, are you able to unmute yourself, or should I come back to you? All right, I still can't hear you, but we welcome you, Mary. And then finally, Tammy Sneed. We see you, Tammy.
Hi, Steve and everyone. Glad to be here today. I'm from the Department of Children and Families, and I lead Connecticut's Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team.
Nice to see you, Tammy. Hi, Kayla.
Hi everyone, my name is Kayla Rodriguez and I'm here coming from Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Nice
Thank
to see
you.
you, Kayla. Thank you for all
Nice
the
seeing
work
you
you
too.
do.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Mary. I see that you've unmuted yourself. Mary, can you hear us? Ben Daigle, I see you've joined us from the Public Defender's Office. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And finally, we have someone who's joined us by telephone. If you could identify yourself just for the purpose of the camera. And that'll be our omniscient observer for the day. Welcome, everybody. It's really nice to see all of you. I want to give an opportunity for our co-chairs just to say a couple words about not only the importance of this topic, maybe a little bit of background on the work of the Trafficking in Persons Council. We're honored to be joined by not only one of the originators of the Trafficking in Persons Council, but one of its original chairs as well. Hi, Representative Jillian Gilchrist. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Steve, and hi everyone. It's so nice to see folks. It's like old home week. So I'm Jillian Gilchrist. I represent the 18th District of West Hartford, and I was formerly the chair of the Trafficking in Persons Council. And I'd say that I learned about this topic back in probably 2015, 2016, and it's one of those things, once you learn it, you can't unlearn it, and it's never left me, and I've just been in the fight with many of the people on this call today. And when it comes to the illicit massage business issue, I've always been blown away because this is a form of human trafficking that's happening right before our very eyes. And most of us just choose to look the other way. At any given time, there's 250 illicit massage businesses in the state of Connecticut, and they're in every community across this state. The positives are that there are lots of people who are fighting this fight. And it's been an honor to get to meet people who have worked throughout their career to try and get these businesses closed, these women to safety, but it will take more of us. And so I am just so pleased that we are having this conversation and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Gilchrist. So we thought that today what we would do is we would first delve into what the numbers are, what the problem is, the root of the problem, what we see nationally, regionally, and locally. And then we would talk to our local experts on what it is that we're doing, how it is that we are encountering the problem, and then how it is that the industry of massage therapy itself is part of the solution. So let's start with our national perspective. Robert, I know that Polaris is a real leader across the country in this work, and we'd love to hear what you're seeing across the country.
Thanks so much, Representative, and thanks to the group for pulling this session together today. As a bit of background, Polaris is an organization that works to reshape the systems that make sex and labor trafficking possible and profitable in North America. For more than a decade, Polaris has assisted thousands of victims and survivors through operating the U.S. National Human Trafficking Hotline, and we built the largest known U.S. data set on the crime. So with the guidance of survivors and working with public sector and private sector partners, we use that data to understand and improve the way trafficking is identified, such as in situations of illicit massage businesses, how victims and survivors can best be assisted, and how ultimately we can prevent this abuse from happening at the scale of the problem. So worldwide, the best estimates that we have are around 25 million people are robbed of that basic right to choose how they live and work. And when it comes to illicit massage businesses, what we've seen is in our 2018 report on illicit massage, there are over 9,000 US illicit massage businesses happening. An important thing to understand about the scale and scope of this problem, as the representative said earlier, is that it's happening in every community around the country, and certainly Connecticut is an example where you have wealthy communities, you have communities that are more economically challenged, And trafficking for the purpose of illicit massage businesses is happening across the board. We've seen various different responses to this situation, whether it's law enforcement interventions, code enforcement, service providers, and a sort of victim engagement first approach. And since we published the illicit massage business report in 2018, we've also been able to get some data on what has been the most effective. As a way of framing this issue, it's important to understand also that many people's concept of how trafficking works may be informed by what rises to the level of provocative media and the things that folks might want to put on the news to get people's attention. But the actual mechanics are usually much more simple and straightforward. You have people who are generally offered an opportunity to either help themselves or their families in an economic situation. And in the case of illicit massage businesses, the vast majority are coming to the United States from another country with the expectation that they'll be able to work in an environment where they can provide food, shelter, medical care for their family at home. And upon arriving at that business in the United States, there's some sort of lie that they've been told about the circumstances that they'll be working. There's some sort of threat made towards their family, and that might be connected to debt that they incurred in order to have this opportunity in the United States. And the result is that people are compelled to perform both massage services that are not sexual services against their will, which is labor trafficking, or they're coerced or physically forced to perform sexual services as part of a massage business. And that is what makes it an illicit massage business. We see people from many areas of the world who are compelled to work in these illicit massage businesses, but certainly there has been a concentration of exploiting people from immigrant populations that don't speak English as their first language because of the barriers that put to having those victims reach out to get help. And we also see that many times people connected to those exploiting businesses are from the home countries of people who are exploited in the United States. As an emerging trend in what has been effective at helping people get out of those situations ultimately, we see that a community engagement approach where victim service organizations and social service organizations are able to develop relationships with the people exploited has yielded the greatest impact on those victims being able to get out and reach safety. Now, another measure of effectiveness and success for many communities has simply been shutting down those businesses. And law enforcement shutdowns have been part of that approach where there's the identification of criminal activity going on in a business. Code enforcement has been part of that approach where business owners are violating the terms of their lease or violating health codes or business tax codes in those cities. But in the cases where there is a non-victim engagement approach, there's both the possibility that we simply won't know what happens to victims once one location is shut down, and it may be that they simply relocate to a different community and reappear again. But more than that, we have heard directly back from survivors that the process of having certain shutdown engagements actually puts them in more harm's way, that traffickers will constrain their movement and ability to communicate with their families, that they'll be more coercive about the situations that they're in. And so it's important when we're thinking about the myriad of different options that are available when folks are attempting to address such a serious and heartbreaking issue as illicit massage business trafficking, that all of these opportunities on a national scale are considered, that the resources of a community are really mapped effectively, especially when it comes to the language access of people who might be exploited, and that strategy that has a long-term theory of change. What is the goal that you want to see in these communities is really taken into consideration, and not simply what is the intervention that may be the most efficient and available at the time that the issue is being engaged. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. For the benefit of our viewers on Facebook Live, today we are, together with the Trafficking in Persons Council, holding a task force on massage parlors, a legislative task force. We are joined by the other co-host of today's conversation, Representative Robin Porter. Representative Porter, if you could just say a few words about why this issue is important to you, and perhaps a little bit of the background of your particular leadership in this space. Welcome, Robin Porter. We'll go back to Robin as soon as she is able to come back. Anne-Marie, so we've seen some of the national perspective of what is happening here. As a leading organization in the state of Connecticut and nationally that it's also addressing this issue, what are you seeing in this region and in Connecticut, Anne-Marie?
Well, again, thank you for letting me join this great task force. We're excited about that. What the work of the Underground primarily is to bring awareness of human trafficking throughout the state of Connecticut, actually speak to what's happening in our state, engage the church and communities beyond to help where they can. And one of the ways that we do that is by equipping teams with an understanding of what trafficking looks like in Connecticut and asking them to go out to various businesses and see to it that these businesses receive the National Human Trafficking Hotline posters that were established in the state of Connecticut under Jillian's time with us. And so we've been doing this for years, and there are many businesses that we've spoken to. We have a statewide database that documents where we've been and even some of the responses that we got. We will get anything from welcome and thank you for that poster, and yes, we'll post it to that doesn't happen here. And it would be safe to say that those places that respond in that way, typically there is some things happening there that would warrant a sign like this. We have captured those responses. We've even done visits to return to these businesses to make sure that they have those posters up. And so we have all that information handy for this task force team. We'll say that on one particular visit I was sharing with you all about a week ago, one of our leaders went into a nail salon actually and delivered a poster, and the owner took it. And by the time she went out to her car and came back in, that poster was already in the trash. She then asked if she could use the restroom, and on her way to the restroom, she discovered that in the back room, there was a good 10 cots that were up in this room. It was clear that people were living there. It was clear that there were personal belongings and so on and so forth. So she reported that to Polaris, and Polaris was kind enough to do an investigation. And within a couple of weeks, the FBI was involved in that. Salon did get closed. I mean, I don't think that that's an exception to the rule at all. And so, when you're able to be boots on the ground, and of course, we never release our teams without fully equipping them and giving them some significant training for at least the experience of that day. But when you have the opportunity to release boots on the ground and have people go into these businesses and actually speak with the owners and even look around, because there's a lot you can see in a few minutes, you're really able to capture a bird's eye view of what's happening in a unique way, right? And so our teams are about that. We've allocated over 100,000, well, we've distributed, I should say, we've not allocated, but we've distributed over 100,000 national human trafficking hotline pieces through the Department of Children and Families, as well as frontline workers, which could include law enforcement and state agencies. And so Polaris's number is well in our state. And then in addition to that, we're working hard to get posters out. And so, yeah, there's an awful lot that we can learn, and I hope that helps you to understand some of the landscape.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. You described that delicate relationship between the providers who help with liberation services, working with community, including the faith community, and law enforcement in order to really root out the issue where it is. And before we come back to law enforcement, Liz, I'd like to turn to you because, we really follow the mantra here of nothing for us without us. And the massage therapy industry in the state of Connecticut is an industry that is well respected, an industry that has a couple of schools, from what I understand, a couple of the bigger schools, and really practitioners across the state. So I'd like to hear from you, Liz, just to give us a flavor, definitionally, what we should be thinking, how we should be framing this, and how it is that the industry is leading in efforts to address the scourge of human trafficking.
No, thank you, Stephen. From a school's perspective, we really have to lead with education, because in Connecticut, so many people still don't even think that this is happening in their town. And as I spoke with a lot of my students and my staff, about what was going on today, they didn't realize it was happening right next door to them. And that was one of the really constant themes. And we have, up in our school, we have the human trafficking posters. Thank you to AMTA for that. We've also added it into our curriculum so that, every student is going to hear about this and know exactly what the problem is and how they can participate and help make it better. But one of the things that, we see a lot is that the terminology is one of the biggest parts of this. And when you hear massage parlor, you automatically think that's an illicit business. When you hear a massage therapist, you think, okay, that sounds like somebody's a little bit more legit versus a masseuse. Massage therapists will call it a massage table versus a massage bed. Those little things and that changing of terminology is such an important part for the legitimate therapists out there to really legitimize what they're doing, because it's so easy for somebody to try to turn something sexual when it's not. And so where anybody who is on a massage table in general is, in a loss of power, that therapist is always in a position of power over them just because of the nature of the relationship. When somebody is undressed under sheets, there's a balance of power there. And it's so important to have those very clear set boundaries and for people to know, their rights, both the therapist and the client. And so that there is no clouding of these areas. And when human trafficking really gets into with massage in Connecticut too, it really changes the perspective of therapists, and it makes them angry, and they want to participate and they want to change this. Very recently in Connecticut, we passed a law that estheticians and nail technicians now are licensed. We were the only state that didn't have a license. And due to the coalition's work, we finally had that license. It just came into effect. And for that is going to be a huge part about changing that part of this as well. And when I was posting about this the other day, I was having person after person after person saying, hey, Liz, guess what? I know this place next to me is not legitimate. They only have men coming in. I see people going in and out through a back door. They come into my business and asking, where's the back room? And they're like, but where do we go? What do we do? And so I think being able to educate the therapists further out there how to participate, how to change this is going to be really crucial. But it's also when you look at, I was looking recently at in the state where all the different licenses are, where people in Connecticut, where they live that are licensed. And roughly about 5,600 massage therapy licenses are in Connecticut. Just over 700 of those come from New York, specifically from Flushing. And when you look at the list of those group from Flushing, the names are extremely similar. A lot of the addresses are the same or one digit off on the apartment or floor. So there's something there, and so it's something to keep in consideration with what's coming in from those areas. Because when you look at Massachusetts, there's only 50 people in Massachusetts currently licensed in Connecticut, and Rhode Island's 37. So when you see over 700 coming from New York, that raises, a red flag like, hey, we need to see what's going on here too.
Thank you, Liz. You really remind us of that point about operating in plain sight and how it is that oftentimes it is that intersection between the practitioner in a legitimate business in the industry and law enforcement and our advocates. It's that working together that's so critical. Courtney, tell us what you're seeing from your perspective in terms of that enforcement. Some of the things that we've been hearing is about how it is that illicit practitioners use certain code words, use certain ways of identifying themselves to the demand that are identifiable. So we'd love to hear more about that, Courtney, and what you're doing.
Sure, and I'd love to share. It's an honor to be here with all of you. So, when it comes to massage parlors, it's very unique and it's significant. It has some significant challenges because it's twofold. It's not just sex trafficking, it's also labor trafficking. So, it really needs to be combated from more than one perspective, and it takes partnership. So what we've done really well here in East Hartford is we've implemented town ordinance violations that gives law enforcement the ability to go into these establishments with the Department of Labor and combat some of the illicit activity, even if we don't have a victim who is comfortable in making a report and disclosing to us. But where we find those challenges is it's a very repetitive cycle. So we might take some enforcement action and we might close these businesses down and with the assistance of Department of Labor. And then eventually these businesses will pay those fines. They'll be able to reopen under a different establishment name, but it's the same people managing that business. Or they recognize that, hey, East Hartford really takes the enforcement of massage parlors seriously. They do proactive enforcement operations. So we're going to relocate our business to another town that doesn't have similar ordinances that can be enforced. So what we've learned over time through our sex trafficking investigations and what we're learning with our labor trafficking investigations is that it's really important to have statewide policy where we're all enforcing the laws consistently and we're sending a strong message as a state that, listen, this is not acceptable and we're not going to continue to allow people to demand this illicit service, because it's not just a matter of the traffickers who are facilitating this. It's also a matter of the buyers who are saying, hey, we're going to purchase this service. We're willing to pay for this service. We're willing to buy people. And they feel that there's no consequences to their actions. So we really need to put our foots down and say, no, this is an issue and we're going to hold you accountable. So one of the studies that we've looked at says men have reported that if the circumstances are right, they will do it again. So 2/3% of the men that have previously admitted to purchasing sex say that they will do it again under the right circumstances. So it's really a matter of addressing the demand and being out there to proactively combat this. But we as law enforcement can't alone. We absolutely need those partnerships. Many times these victims are incredibly afraid of us as law enforcement. We will identify the indicators that there is more than just labor trafficking going on, that there's elements of sex trafficking, but they're not giving us those disclosures. And we're also limited with our statute of limitations when it comes to labor trafficking violations. So there's definitely some challenges, and those challenges could really benefit from further partnership across the state and more consistent practices across the state and not individualized from town to town.
Thank you, Courtney. Part of the energy around the formation of this task force by the co-chairs was really the idea of not only understanding the landscape, both state, regional, and national, but also understanding how it is that we can think about the various legal components that are involved here and how we can lift barriers, perhaps within our own laws in the state of Connecticut and working with our regional partners to really address this issue. So this is, again, the beginning of a conversation, a series of conversations. We are envisioning 2 or 3 more convenings of this task force. And then, of course, a collection of recommendations that we will make to the legislature under the leadership of the co-chairs to address some of these issues. Part of it, of course, is to really understand what the root of the situation is. And thank you for bringing up the idea of the demand. because we think that that is critical. That is a component of this work that I think inures to the benefit of all types of trafficking, how it is that we get to the root of the issue, which is the demand side. So thank you for that, Courtney. Ron, I'd like to turn to you, because you in a lot of ways have been doing this work for a long time and in various wearing various hats as a community person. So tell us, Ron, what is your engagement and what have you seen in the state of Connecticut?
Well, I see Connecticut really forming. We keep hearing about partnerships and education, and I think those are the key. And I think we are really making great strides in that area. Before I retired from as a detective sergeant, I actually came across a case by accident. A survivor had jumped out of a window during a traffic stop, and at that time, I had minimal training in the area of human trafficking, but from what I was hearing on my radio, things sounded really like something I should show up for. And when I did, turned out the young lady had, jumped out of a window to save herself from her trafficker. What ensued after that is I found myself kind of helpless as a law enforcement professional on what to do next. And through that frustration and trying to get her connected to services and keeping track of her movements, and more importantly, getting her to trust me to be able to help her and help others in her position, I found some obstacles in the way. So after that experience, I said that after, up until the point where I retired, this is an area that I wanted to be involved in, specifically in the area of creating community awareness, because this was happening in a neighborhood that was one that like we all live in, and it was underneath right in front of other people's noses, and no one ever knew what was going on until she escaped from this window. But so I made a commitment then that I was going to try to bring awareness to various communities and build these partnerships, because like it's been said, a few times, partnerships are the key. The answer isn't going to come from one particular group or agency. I think everybody has something to offer here. So what I've done is partnered with groups like Anne Marie's The Underground. I partnered with the boards of educations, Chamber of Commerce, local community and health organizations, school nursing organizations, to bring awareness, because what we've learned is that everyone comes in contact with a survivor and doesn't even know it. So I want to be able to be that bridge to bring the law enforcement side, the community awareness side, and the partnerships together.
I'm seeing a real wraparound response when it comes to how it is that you approach liberating a person who is the subject of human and labor trafficking. I want to get back in a little bit to that question of the labor and the human sex trafficking dynamic of this. But first, Anne Marie, on that full service approach, how it is that you help people. Tell us the role of faith-based organizations, because I'm hearing more and more faith-based organizations partnering with community, with government, and with law enforcement to really be part of that front line. Why is that important to the people that you are helping?
Thanks, Steve. Our role, the Underground's role, I think, in the state of Connecticut is really to absolutely be about partnership and being unified with those that are on the front lines, just looking for the best possible outcome for those that are being victimized to experience stabilization if they want to get out of that life, and then a pathway of care. And so our group, right, we attract people at our table that are leaders within the faith-based community, but also leaders like Courtney and Ron and others. Even Jillian has been good to sit with us from time to time. We, a couple of years ago, did a great initiative trying to find housing for the state of Connecticut. And so we spent 2 years looking for various providers, looking at their programs, trying to bring the best possible partners to the state of Connecticut. And we did identify a safe home that's coming. It's called Amira. They're a tier 3. They're well known in the state of Massachusetts, and they're just about ready to open, thankfully. We participated in bringing emergency beds to the state, which Polaris just indicated last week was still the #1 need in the state of Connecticut, to have a place where victims who want to come out of the life, just an exit plan where they can come, at least be safe for a few days until we start moving them into that next step of treatment, should they want that, or if they're looking to explore a different kind of experience, we can help them with that, such as independent living. I mean, the underground and our churches are about just trying to, like I said, help people experience freedom if they want it. And there's so many ways to tap into our group. And especially for this task force, I put on the table the last time we spoke, the possibility of having interpreters come through the faith-based initiative, you know, and just be able to sit with law enforcement at that point of outreach. We do so much outreach as the underground. Aside from sending volunteers, we actually have others who have been trained in very deep ways in the anti-trafficking effort. And those folks are going out to different places to meet those victims right where they're at and help them understand that if they want to leave, you know, there's a pathway to that. I mean, we don't, you have to have significant experience to do that. It's not like everybody's doing that, but because we conduct outreach, what I'm saying is that we find that victims want to come out of the light. So if you're willing to stand with them and go to them where they're at, they're willing to come. Some, not all. So that's who we want to serve, right? And we want to serve with excellent programs. And so we're just part of this great big network that's on this call today. And just trying to assist wherever we can and fill in the gaps that are still in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So much of what you describe is about building trust. And I really appreciate you elevating the question of language access, because being able to communicate not only in the moment of emergency, but also on the trajectory toward healing and independence is so very critical. And when I think of our frontline responders, whether it's your organizations or our law enforcement partners who go out and actually help on the front line, I think about the importance of language access and being able to have that resource on the ready. So I'm wondering if any of you could address the question of language access for the state of Connecticut. We've been thinking a lot about this, especially around COVID, how it is that the state would benefit from a unified language access strategy, whereby there would be that one place where we could access not only immediate interpretation, simultaneous interpretation, but also translation of documents, such as some of those important documents that under yours and Representative Jillian Gilchrist's leadership were created early on in the work of the Trafficking in Persons Council. So language access, would anyone like to speak to that? Maybe what you're seeing in other states or what you think is important here?
Stephen, I can't talk to how other states are responding to that, but I can tell you that that is absolutely something that we as law enforcement need and can benefit from. That is something, and I'm not talking about a language line, because we have the ability to call into a language line and connect to a translator. We need a face-to-face interaction where people can connect and feel like, all right, this person genuinely cares about me. They can read facial expression, and it's not just merely holding a phone to their ear and listening. People really respond to face-to-face interactions and emotional expression. So it's really important, you know, and it would be incredibly beneficial when we go out and do proactive enforcement to have a translator be a part of our team and understand the team's mission to recover victims. And when we look at the recovery of victims, that's not saying that they have to report or file a police report. We are absolutely equipped to connect them to our faith-based organizations, such as the Underground, and just get them out of that bad situation. And if we can prosecute the abusers and the perpetrators later, we absolutely will. But the number one responsibility should be in connecting to those victims and getting those victims the support that they need. And it starts with getting past that language barrier.
Thank you, Courtney. And I think the priority and the prerogative of really getting to liberation first and enforcement next is really well received. Thank you. Liz, I know that you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity that the estheticians, nail technicians, and massage therapists in Connecticut, I think if we enlisted them and empowered them to be part of this, they're going to want to be part of that solution and to be able to participate, not only, to help their own businesses, but massage therapists in general, healers. They're people who have empathy and have a lot of understanding and believe in the power of touch and kindness. And I think they're going to be able to translate through to somebody who is being trafficked in a way that maybe somebody else might not be able to. And they can also help them with a pathway out through education, and not just get them out of the emergency situation, but it's also the what after and what comes next and helping them to go into a different path or to have those different resources. So I think if you elicit, if you ask, they will come, they will stand up, they will participate, and they will stand behind and help.
Liz, thank you so much. And, I see Representative Robin Porter, part of this dynamic is that there is the sex trafficking component of this, but also the labor trafficking component of this, and the different laws, the different maybe perverse incentives that support either of those industries or either of those ways of exploiting human beings. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the labor trafficking. And I wonder if I could start with Robert and then come to Representative Porter. Robert, what are you seeing nationally in terms of some of the labor trafficking dynamic, the interstate aspect of labor trafficking, and whether there are any federal or regional efforts at really addressing labor trafficking in this area and in others?
Sure. So as Liz mentioned earlier, we certainly are able to see some networks across state lines that emerge related to trafficking situations. They generally can be connected in labor trafficking to concentrations of different ethnic or language groups. So just as any form of immigration works, if you move to a country, you're probably going to move to the area of that country where people are speaking your language, where they have the foods that you want to eat, the cultural institutions that you want to connect to. And we certainly see concentrations of labor trafficking happening connected to areas of concentration where people are just naturally immigrating into the country. I think one of the important things to understand on a national level is that there are certain systems that put people in a situation of disadvantage upon entering the country. So for example, the work visa system that we have right now, for many people who end up being trafficked for labor, they'll enter the country legally and under what they believe are legally prepared documents to work. The challenge comes in if their employer, their sponsor of their visa, seeks to exploit that person, they literally can't leave that job and go to a different job. They have to find a new sponsor or get permission from the sponsor who may be exploiting them, which is incredibly unlikely that someone will do that. And if they don't want to continue working in that situation, which many times they've taken on debt to be able to have that job opportunity, to be able to move to do this work, they'll be deported. And that's unfortunately on a federal level, we've seen some things related to people reporting trafficking situations. And if their report doesn't go through, that they'll be referred to a peer for possible deportation, even if they attempted to enter the country to do legal work. So there are systems that are put in place that set someone at a disadvantage right out of the gate. I think it's also important to know that the language barriers that folks were talking about, that doesn't just end up being a challenge at the moment of intervention that someone might be trying to get out of a labor trafficking situation. If you don't feel like there are job opportunities available with the language that you speak, if you don't feel like you can get stable housing or food for your family or medical care with the language that you speak because those services don't feel readily available, your trafficker can use all of those barriers that language might set up or a lack of cultural awareness might set up to say, there's no way for you to get out of this situation. I'm your only lifeline to the basic needs of you and your family. So even if I'm treating you badly, even if I lied to you about what this job was going to be, even if I'm making you work 14, 16 hours a day and not paying you for it, you really don't have very many other options. And that's why I would say, faith communities as well as cultural communities are so essential in giving people not just an immediate opportunity to get out, but a real sense of an alternative means of support. And that's why what we've seen with anti-labor trafficking work is that many of the most successful models, and if you want to look at the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, for example, in Immokalee, Florida, they brought together a whole community of all sorts of people who weren't being exploited, but were connected to the backgrounds of the people who were, and they let that community engage and offer alternatives and create safety, so that it wasn't just a short-term get out of this bad situation now. It was really, we're going to have a community that will take care of you, and there is an alternative, because the fear of leaving a trafficker is real. There are real consequences for people and their families if they try to leave that situation. And so state governments, city governments, and the federal government need to give real, tangible opportunities. And sometimes that costs money to make those opportunities available.
Robert, thank you for that explanation and the linking together of workers, worker rights, whether it be workers that are here under a legal infrastructure, perhaps for the benefit of someone who is trying to take advantage of them, or workers who are here under the undocumented worker infrastructure, benefiting the state, as we know, but under the radar in terms of protections, in terms of all the other things. So Robin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the labor and worker protection issues that are involved in this space. You know, not only the workers who seem to be trapped and feel alone, but how is it that we as a state can support workers and help them feel like if they do have trouble within an industry, whether it is above board or illicit, that they can turn to somebody and be supported?
Steve, you know, this aspect of labor is really new to me. And I'm listening to what Robert is saying, and I myself am coming up with quite a few questions and great concern around how folks are under the radar, right? How we're not able to detect them. The one thing that I did know, Robert, that you said, what I'm hearing is, you know, creating a fabric, right? A social cohesion within community that can respond in ways that, you know, Liz and others are getting pushback because of the lack of trust issue, the language access. I think all of that ties into what we can look to do on a state level. But I think the first thing you do, and what I keep hearing, is address the trust issue. How do we even infiltrate in order to assist and help if they don't trust us from the gate? So, and we talk about police, you know, Ronald talked about as an officer, how, you know, he was able to go in, but then he got stuck, right? He wasn't able to get past that point of, okay, now what do I do? So I think I'm sitting in pretty much the same predicament, because as a state legislator, and I would love to hear from Jillian, because she is really the one out of the two of us that have done extensive work in this wheelhouse and have this experience. This is a learning curve. And what I'm hearing is not anything that I didn't know, but the depths at which we're going right now is very revealing to me. And whatever it is that we can do to legislate, right? Things that will help to close these loopholes and to break down these barriers, I'm here to do. So, I mean, at this point, Steve, I'm all ears, and I'm probably going to have questions for folks on the panel on what, because you know what I say, the people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions, right? So I'm looking to gain an education and some knowledge in order to use that as power when I do go to legislate what it is we can do at the state level to address these issues. So I'm looking to you all to really give me, you know, some sound advice based on your experience and what it is you know from being on the ground.
Thank you so much. And it would seem to me, Robin, that as we focus on lifting up the workers who are being exploited, whether it's through sex trafficking or labor trafficking, we are also lifting up the industries that they are using as a ruse to exploit these people. Because when I think about all the things that you described, Liz, how it is that, you know, the industry suffers because of the abuse that's happening in their name, right? So I'd love to hear from you how it is that focusing on protecting workers and focusing on really lifting up the industry are two things that are connected.
I think with the industry right now, you know, just as massage therapy as a whole, you know, we are so touch deprived as a generation, and people are so focused on their cell phones, their emails, and everything else that people are searching out touch in more ways. And sometimes they're looking in ways that they shouldn't. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, response to what Representative Porter had said was that, you know, we're talking about the ramifications too. And one of the things that I hear so often is that there are legitimate businesses out there that are scared to report because they don't want something to fall back on them, because maybe they share a landlord or it's their neighbor and they see the spa across the street doing something that they know is not legitimate. And they're terrified what's going to happen to them. I talked to a business owner the other day who said, you know, we're looking at moving our business because we know the people next to us are not legitimate. We've tried to address it and we're getting nowhere, and we're scared because they keep sending men into our business and they're terrifying us every single day. And they said, do we want to quit the industry, or what do we want to do? And so by education and empowering people and using the therapists that are out there, we need to give them an avenue to be able to go report safely, and so that it doesn't fall back on them, because they're going to be your best eyes and ears out there. And the therapists out there want to see change. They want to protect their own licenses and all the hard work that they've done, but they need to be able to do it in a way that's not going to hurt them as well, because they're terrified. When they have men coming in and threatening them, don't you dare report me and things, it's very, very scary for the legitimate businesses out there too.
Thank you, Liz. You know, and thank you for that reminder that with every effort for information, with every effort for getting for increasing public awareness, we have to match that effort with first response and resourcing on the back end. And that's critically important when someone needs to know, if I see something, to whom do I say something? And that connection can be so critical to our first responders. Ron and Courtney, tell us what you're seeing. You know, part of the dynamic here is the out-of-state actors here. And the fact that some of these businesses are owned by out-of-state owners. How do you address some of those interstate issues in terms of the illegality and the crime coming through this thoroughfare that is Connecticut at times? Ron, I'll start with you since you've unmuted.
I think by what we've been discussing around legislation and local ordinances is really a key to that, by providing those boundaries that people in those spaces that people can operate within. And if you step outside that, it's easier to flag those businesses and those efforts where illicit activity is going on. So I would say, local ordinances and legislation, I think, is the key.
Thank you, Ron. Courtney, how do you address the issue of the outside actor, the interstate actor in your law enforcement duties?
Right, so that can be really complex, to be honest with you, Steve. And again, it requires those partnerships. On a local level, we can absolutely do surveillance, and we can combat it within the walls of our jurisdiction. But if we're talking about crossing state lines, then obviously we are going to need to lean on our federal partners to assist us in those investigations. And again, those challenges come where there's inconsistent legislation, and not everybody has the same type of enforcement action available to them. And I think it's important to point out that it's not just a matter of crossing state lines. We also have websites, and I know Emily did a significant report on it, such as Rub Maps, and that organization is operating in a foreign-based country. They're not complying with United States search warrants or subpoenas. So we're very limited in what we can get for information when it comes to taking enforcement action, and sometimes the perpetrators are not even in the United States. But it's really important to address that, there's those websites that they're eluding law enforcement. They're taking advantage of where we have limited access to information, and they're fully taking advantage of that. So, that's something where we could really benefit from legislation for sure.
Thank you, Courtney. Jillian, perhaps this is a question for you in your experience. One of the things that we think about is how it is that the center of illegality, which could be a front for a business, it could be a piece of land that's owned by an external landowner. How is it? Have you thought of strategies in which we can actually attach or address or have a takings of that illegally used property in order to wrestle away the illegal space from the person who's using it for illegal practices? Thinking about what Liz mentioned, those honest to goodness businesses that are right next door to a space that's being used illegally. How is it that we can perhaps attack the location and liberate the location in order to liberate the people who are being exploited on the location?
Thank you, Steve. And yeah, I've thought of that as a measure to address this. So in my time on the Trafficking in Persons Council, and for those who served with me when I was on it, you'll recall we had a presentation from the Department of Labor who had gone in and done investigations, and they would explain what it actually looked like and felt like to go into these illicit massage businesses. And I'll give a little bit, they'd say they'd go in and there was a camera on the door facing in. So it was obvious that the one individual worker inside was being monitored. It was apparent that the individual was living in the location because there was a suitcase right in the closet. So just the way they would describe, and it was across the board, regardless, they would say some of these were in a strip mall, but some were in the bottom of a 3-story home. And so the way they describe it to me made it seem as though the individual renting them the space would also be able to get the sense that this was not above board. And so I don't think it's asking too much for someone who rents a place of business, who rents a building, to actually know what's taking place in their building. And so I think we could create some laws surrounding that you should have, you should know what's going on. And if it's not an above board business, then there would be some ramifications. And I think by financially holding those individuals accountable, they might be less likely to rent that space to those folks.
Thank you, Jillian. That complicity of silence and those markers that law enforcement uses, that our providers and responders use to identify when these things may be happening, what you're describing are the markers that perhaps a landowner or a landlord can see every day and either is unwilling or doesn't know how to report. And what I'm hearing, I can almost hear, the good actors who are owners saying, look, I want to know what my rights are, what I can do to report this if this is happening on my property, and how I can help in ensuring that the law is being met. But of course, I can also hear the landlords who would turn the other way and allow this to happen under their very own watch, which is very, very distressing given the magnitude of this problem. So thank you for that, Jillian. Ron, I see that you've unmuted. I wonder if in your work, both in law enforcement and now as a practitioner in this space, what you think about the dynamic between the landowner and the perpetrator.
Well, I think it's a interesting dynamic. Oftentimes, the landowners are threatened themselves when they want to do something. So we got to find a mechanism in a way that they can report, maybe confidentially or in some way educate them on different avenues to go to reach out to law enforcement or even to the city inspectors or somebody that they can notify I just think it's just a matter of finding the right avenue and building that trust and educating people on what they can and cannot do.
Thank you, Ronald. I think
Sure.
about what the violations here might be. And one of the violations that comes to mind, thanks to one of our viewers, is impersonating a massage therapist and the associated fines and penalties for that violation. I wonder if you think, perhaps Robert, if you think that these fines and penalties are enough, and whether we should think about using higher fines and penalties as a way to deter and as a way to address this issue.
Well, I think one of the key questions here, again, ends up being what the long-term outcomes are that folks are looking for. When we think about leveling these penalties as a method of behavior change, there's an additional opportunity, which is creating support for the people who are being exploited. And so certainly with other types of victim assistance funds, you can tie both civil penalties and criminal penalties and enhanced fees directly to impacted victims. And in a number of states, there are dedicated human trafficking victim assistance funds tied to some types of crime. I would say one of the interventions that we're seeing emerge around illicit massage businesses and holding the property owners accountable is simply tying the criminal acts of the people who are inhabiting that business directly to the landowner, the renter, by alerting them to the criminality of the acts that are going on and having some sort of structure under statute that says, following clear direction from a government agency, whether that's a prosecuting attorney's office or law enforcement agency, at that point, the landlord becomes a responsible party, because if they are receiving income from a business that they know is engaged in criminal conduct, then they are part of that criminal conduct. And if there are fines that need to be levied in a situation like that, those could go directly back into supporting the types of culturally informed, community fabric building services that would then be able to engage people in those businesses. And, to some of the points earlier, it's a much more light touch intervention to simply alert by letter that landowner that says, here are the reasons that we think criminal conduct is happening in this business. It is your responsibility, now that you have this knowledge, to make sure that this doesn't continue. And if we have evidence that is continuing past the state that you've been notified, you could be both civilly and criminally liable. Not that you're charging them with anything, but what we've seen is landlords are fairly proactive at that point. The cost benefit analysis around keeping a tenant in does not seem to push them past that point of, okay, before I was being threatened with possibly something happening, but now I can just show this letter to the tenant, say, you can't stay here anymore. But if survivor services are available, that can also be accompanied with outreach to that business to say, this business is being shut down and here are the services available to the people who might be impacted.
Thank you for that, Robert. You make me think of that dynamic between the victimizer, which can be sometimes a ubiquitous, absent, distant kind of actor. You mentioned an area in New York, but of course, this is the trade of people is an international affair, and with international dynamics and criminality. And then you also think on the demand side, and how it is that we address that. But oftentimes, the lowest hanging fruit is the victim themselves. So I wonder, how is it that once we switch our mindset to really try and address the supplier and demand rather than focusing on the person who's been vulnerated, that opens up a lot of opportunities to actually help the person who's been vulnerated. So I'd like to for someone, perhaps Anne-Marie, to talk about how it is that switch in mindset really can help us understand that the real victim here is the person who's being bought, sold, and traded.
I did it again. Sorry about that. You really just said it all, Steve. If we could shift, right, if we could shift in the way that we look at this whole anti-trafficking work and right who the victims are, it would mean everything. I loved what Robert had to say about if we could find ways to legislate and have owners, landlords accountable for what kind of businesses they place in their structures. And when they cross lines and don't put legitimate businesses in place, there's ways to fine them and then have those fines go into a fund to help victims and survivors create a new life. I think that would be the best thing that we could do as a society and community around these people. And then to Robert's point, I have to say, because we have worked with a fair amount of adult victims, it's a long process to help them transition into a new life. That's not a quick thing. And it requires a community, many partnerships beyond the ones on this line. And I think we've all spoken to that. And so there might be even ways where those fines might help the providers that are out there giving care or providing housing, or providing the mentors that it will take to help them get to transition into like a community, one that they might live in but have never experienced. I mean, traffickers really keep these folks very isolated, and there's so many barriers that they have upon release. They really need people to walk alongside with them for a great season in order for them to transition into freedom. And so if we could be victim-centered in our approaches to how we handle this, the creativity that we could gather, especially from a task force like this, it could be life-changing for many of them. And then instead of just showing up and closing down a shop and letting these people just go, there is no place for them to go. So it's likely that they're going to re-enter into trafficking. Perhaps instead of that being the case, there'd actually be a place for them, a whole strategic plan for them to access freedom if that's what they want, and have it be very legitimate. I'd love to see that happen. Mm-hmm.
Anne-Marie, thank you so much. I hear you saying to access freedom if that's what they want. And I love your focus on human dignity and your focus on the power of the individual to make the choices that they can when they are informed, when they are surrounded by care, by opportunity, but also by help when they need it. So thank you for that sensitivity. I'd like to, as a way of organizing ourselves around these issues, it seems to me that it would be useful, perhaps as our part 2 and our part 3, to really think about the labor dynamics here and the labor violations that are happening, the labor exploitation, and also the sex exploitation that is happening. It seems to me that each one of these would benefit from its own deep dive in order to really understand what the course of action and response might be, what the dynamics are for each. I think we would benefit from that sort of analysis. So for the listening public and for all of you, I'd like to invite you to help me plan at least our next 2 conversations, so that maybe disaggregate these 2. You may advise me that's not a good idea, but if it is, to disaggregate the 2 and think about what recommendations and approaches may look like on the labor trafficking issue and on the sexual exploitation and trafficking issue. The demand, I imagine, is different. Also the responses may be nuanced. So I'd like for us to think of it that way. While we think a little bit, and before I ask my next question, I would like to now open the floor to the rest of our participants. As you heard in the beginning, we are joined by not only members of the Trafficking in Persons Council, but also members, friends and colleagues of some of you who are on this call. And I would like to invite you to turn on your cameras, make yourself present if you'd like, and I'll call on you if you have a question. I'm going to start with Nikki. Nikki, welcome. If you could introduce yourself, just say who you are, and we're very happy that you're here and grateful.
Hi, I'm Nikki Arell. I'm a licensed massage therapist here in the state of Connecticut, have been since 2006, and I am on the American Massage Therapy Connecticut chapter board as the government relations chair. And I know I've worked with the TIP Council previously, as have both Becca and Scott, predecessors of mine.
Welcome. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you so much. I'd love to open up the floor now for other questions. And as we think of that, Robin and Jillian, this demand side, whether it's the demand side for forced labor or the demand side for forced sex, tell us about the importance to your mind as you know, we're all learning here as we're doing, the importance on from your perspective on focusing on the demand side.
I'll jump in. You know, I think it was Courtney who said that there was a recent study that 2/3 will do it again. And that's similar to what I had heard when I was doing this work. And what I was taught in doing the work is that it really comes down to risk and consequence for primarily men. And, you know, we need to put it out there. In the research I did over the years, it's well over 95% of buyers are men. And so when it comes to risk and consequence, right now, it's still pretty non-existent. The Rub Maps website that was mentioned is right there on the web, and there are men discussing on it. Men park in these parking lots and walk right in. So we really need to elevate the risk and consequence. And my take on it had always been the cultural piece. I mean, because I had learned early on that you can't arrest this problem away. And so I think that's a key component, is to discuss the cultural piece and why we're so accepting as a culture that men will buy sex. And there's lots of kind of disregard for why that might happen. And I think we really need to move beyond, well, he's not happy at home, or I've heard, well, at least he's not taking it out on his wife. I mean, there's certain things that are just so offensive and inappropriate. At the end of the day, there are men in our communities who are deciding to exploit women in illicit massage businesses. And we need to have that hard conversation, and we need to move from there. So I think the demand is huge because it really, I think, makes people question why these entities exist, because there is just an implicit acceptance that some men will buy sex, and that's what we need to challenge.
Wow, thank you, Jillian. Robin?
Thanks, Steve. And I mean, I totally agree with Jillian. I think the demand is there also because it has gone unchecked. You know, we often say, if you see something, say something. And this is an instance where we're actually seeing the opposite. If you see something, don't say nothing, right? So I think that people have to be made more comfortable and be able to rest assured in the fact that, you know, there's going to be some protections if they do come forward, if they do speak up, if they do talk, and to deal with the root cause. I mean, and I think this starts with the people that are actually are making the demand. You know, it starts with the men, and what I think Jillian said, over 95% of them are men. And these are conversations that need to be had. And there definitely needs to be penalties put in place. There needs to be clear messages sent that this behavior is unacceptable, that it will no longer be tolerated. And if this is something that you insist on pursuing, that there will be penalties for doing so. But I think on the flip side of that is also, is there a need for some kind of intervention? I mean, I don't even know how to put it. You know, men looking for sex and willing to pay for sex. There's a lot to be said there, but I'm not a man and I've never paid for sex. So I think there's conversations that need to be had with the people that are victimizing these women and taking advantage of vulnerable, very vulnerable people in vulnerable situations, and the fear mongering that goes into it. I think there's an assessment that needs to be made on the individuals that are actually, I don't want to say profiting, but I mean, it's their pleasure, right? So I think there's something to be said about having some way to communicate and figure out, you know, why this is happening. Not just that it's happening and we want it to stop, but what is the root cause? You know, how do we address this effectively in a way that's not just going to stop it from happening, but stop the need and the demand, right? I think that's where we have to take a deeper dive.
Thank you, Robin. Ending the demand. You know, you think about some of this, some of the corollary conversations that we're having around the state, around empathy, education around early empathy and connection, and how we start learning these skills when we're young. And I wonder whether some of those conversations should include the question of human integrity, human dignity, and how it is that we can all work together to promote those key principles. And, you know, just like the education needs to start early, we also know that the exploitation starts early. So is there anyone who can give us some stats on what are the ages of the people who are being exploited, of the victims in the state of Connecticut? I don't know whether anyone here has that information, but I think it's important that the viewing public know what are the ages of the people who are being exploited and where are they from?
Stephen, we can talk about our statistics of child sex trafficking victims, but it also brings to light a really important point that we in Connecticut have done a great job with tracking data for child victims, but we still have room for improvement with tracking statistics for our adult victims.
Yeah.
So we're really lacking in being able to tell you more about the demographics of our adult victims, but right now in Connecticut, the average age that we see children being sexually exploited is between 12 and 16. But we also have victims that are significantly younger, and we also have victims that are significantly older. It's truly a crime that doesn't discriminate. So we see victims of all ages, all races, all ethnicities, and we see boys and girls being victimized. And we also see our LGBTQI population becoming incredibly vulnerable to sex trafficking.
Thank you for that, Courtney. Jillian, I see that you've raised your hand.
Yeah, not to put Robert on this spot, but I do believe when we talk about the population victimized in the illicit massage businesses, interestingly, it does run in some ways counter to what Courtney's talking about. And I couldn't agree more with Courtney that when we do look at stats in Connecticut, it tends to be younger. But the victims in illicit massage businesses, interestingly, tend to be in their 40s, I believe, 40s and even 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s of Asian descent. And so I don't know why that is, and would love if Robert could jump in with maybe a national perspective on why that's the case.
I think it's important to understand the different types of exploitation really falling in line much more with who can be made vulnerable and who traffickers can exploit. So in the United States, the questions around who sex traffickers can exploit and who sex buyers can see as non-threatening or maybe not as powerful in order to, react if they're attempting to be exploited are people who are younger, are people coming from communities who are experiencing more poverty, who are maybe accessing less education, runaway and homeless youth who have less stable systems that they can go to. And it's important to mention as well, people who might not be as believed by law enforcement and feel as confident engaging with law enforcement as the sex buyers themselves, who have a certain level of economic status because that's the money that they're using to buy sex. I think when we talk about illicit massage businesses, what you see is a population that's vulnerable, but along different lines. They're vulnerable because of their immigration status. They're vulnerable because of their language access to services. They're vulnerable because of their networks of support. And that, as was mentioned earlier, isn't just the vulnerabilities that they're experiencing in this country. One of the reasons that people are transported from one country to another in order to exploit them is to destabilize them. That's part of the mechanism. And so the point at which you'd be transporting someone and applying for, a family visa or work visa is more likely to be after a person has become an adult. Doing that with children, there are just more safeguards in place. And so you do see people in their 20s, 30s, 40s who are being exploited in illicit massage businesses because those are the people that, due to their vulnerabilities at home, can be exploited by traffickers because of their responsibilities to take care of their family, because of their feeling that they can go out in the world and earn income. In the United States, the vulnerabilities around domestic trafficking, especially domestic sex trafficking, just fall on different lines. But the ultimate underlying factor here is that people are vulnerable in a way that can be addressed, that some other countries have been successful in addressing by providing for basic opportunities for people to get their own economic stability, by providing basic care for people's children and people's families, and holding accountable people who would seek to exploit or hurt them, which, as was mentioned earlier, some folks do not feel confident that if they come forward and say, I'm being hurt or someone I know is being hurt, that they're going to have the safety that they need, especially when those exploiters might be people in positions of power, definitely are positions in positions of economic privilege. Those are the people that you don't necessarily want to go up against or feel safe being on the other side of criminal justice from. And so if we get those systems in place that can protect everyone, that means less exploiting of children and less exploiting of vulnerable adults.
Robert, thank you for that. You know, you've really proved the point of why it is so critical to have data, because just in your dissertation now, you were able to really explain what the data shows in terms of how the vulnerability manifests and how the exploitation manifests around that vulnerability. And that is so critical. And when you think about how it is that in the state of Connecticut, we have the data for the young people who are being exploited in a lot of ways because we have decided as a state that we care about our little ones and that we're going to make sure that these things don't happen to our young people. But it seems that that critical decision about caring about vulnerable adults and vulnerable women who are being exploited, it seems that we haven't made that decision yet in terms of our policy and in terms of our practice. So that's really critical, making the decision as an institution, as a set of institutions that support vulnerable people, that there is a need here, there are vulnerabilities, here's where they are, and this is why it's important that we address them. So that those in a lot of ways are policy decisions. In a lot of ways, those decisions are based on really addressing our own biases about victimization and about what we perceive to be victims. So I really appreciate not only the point that you made in terms earlier that others made, including you, Jillian, about the lack of data, but also the importance of data and how it relates. Emily, as we come to the close of this conversation, Emily, I know that you have been really following this work and you've been really diligent in your analysis, not only locally, but also nationally, of what it is that's happening in these spaces. So firstly, I want to appreciate your investigation and also see if you have any questions for any of our panelists as we move to the close of the hour.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity to weigh in. I really am so grateful. Before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on a couple of points. And one thing that has not been discussed yet is the potential impact of the pandemic on trafficking patterns and trends. And I was hoping that some of our experts here who have been working on this space could discuss how that might be a factor this year.
Thank you, Emily. I would love if one of our panelists could weigh in on the effects of the pandemic. We know that in vulnerable times, vulnerators move toward the most vulnerable among us. And we saw that in Sandy Hook, and we saw that in the response to Sandy Hook, quite frankly. So can someone speak to the question of the pandemic and how it may be impacting trafficking?
Sure. So I think it's like if we look at it from a data point, we're definitely going to have inaccurate numbers for 2020. Our data is not going to portray what is actually happening out there because to protect our frontline workers, we're not able to go out there and do the proactive enforcement that we had developed over the last few years. And I know we're running out of time, so maybe at a future meeting, we can share that chart of Fair Labor Standard Act violations that Connecticut's been impacted by But I think those numbers are going to be drastically impacted because we haven't been able to go out there and do proactive enforcement. And I think that the numbers are not going to accurately portray what is happening. We know that the pandemic has not stopped our perpetrators from continuing to purchase sex.
Thank you, Courtney. We see the effect of the pandemic, that particular effect that you're mentioning, which is not only the isolating effects of the pandemic keeping us away from each other, but also pushing into the shadows any of the illegality that may be happening. As you said, the demand does not end because there's a pandemic. Emily, I don't know whether you said you had a couple of other questions for our panel or observations.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd just like to pose 2 more quick questions if you have time.
Sure.
And I really wanted to follow up on aspects of the 2018 TIP Council report. And in that report, the 2018 annual report, only 55 of 101 police departments had submitted information to you on trafficking data that you had requested. And I know that the 2019 TIP Council annual report did not contain data from police departments and the Chief State's Attorney's Office because of an email issue that you explained. But I was wondering if you could talk about whether this year you've received better participation from police departments in data collection and when this information might become available to the public.
Thank you so much for that question, Emily. Jillian, if you could speak to the reason and the importance of having that data delivered to the Trafficking in Persons Council, why that experience may be that we weren't robustly receiving that information, and also how it is that we can work closer with our law enforcement friends for that information to reach the Trafficking in Persons Council so that we can include that in our analysis.
Sure. So thank you for the question. We had put that requirement into state statute because we know how important data is to inform policy decisions. And the first year out of the gate, which for the life of me now, I can't recall what year would have been the first year that data was required. There wasn't a standard reporting form. And so the only thing police departments had to go on was what was written in state statute. Now the Trafficking in Persons Council did work through the Police Chiefs Association and the Chief State's Attorney's Office to try and get the information out in a uniform manner. But it was released pretty late. And so some reports came in via email, some did come in this form we had developed. The following year, we decided, let's do it through a Google Doc. And I think that is the year that we were able to get the best data to date. As Steve can tell you, and I'll tell you again, I mean, it came down to resources, quite frankly, because the Trafficking Persons Council falls under the commission. There was no entity charged with, well, I guess it was the commission because at first the reports were supposed to go, I think, to the committee. Then they switched it the next year and it did then say it was going to the commission. So I think there needs to be a revisiting, I think, with law enforcement for them to understand why we're asking for the information, that this isn't just another level of bureaucracy, that we want to understand certain things and that we want to partner with them in order to be able to improve policies and practices. Just a quick example, one of the things we requested, which is still required, is how many reports of missing children. And I'm probably getting the term wrong, and I'm looking around to see who knows the term of. But what we learned that first year is the numbers came in and they were staggering because police departments have to report any time a call comes in about a missing child. And so we immediately realized that that wasn't the data we actually wanted. Why we were asking for that data is because when it comes to children who are being trafficked in the state of Connecticut, in particular sex trafficking, many run away and go missing again and again. And so we wanted that data for that reason. Well, we immediately realized that data point isn't going to help us. And so I think there is a need to revisit what was asked in the original legislation, but then also to both engage law enforcement to understand why we're asking for this, and then to create again, it could just be a Google form. It really doesn't have to be too complicated, but a way to have law enforcement submit the same data into a form so that they're not having this additional layer of work.
Thank you for that, Jillian. You mentioned a couple of dynamics there that are in play. One is not only revisiting why it is that we're doing this, and that takes, I think, working with law enforcement and really doubling down on the importance of this information. And perhaps that can be the subject of one of the conversations that we have in this setting. And we will invite our partners in law enforcement and also our partners in municipal government to express the importance of this work. But secondly is the resourcing around this work. And I think that as with so much of what is done in order to do this work, resources, and sometimes even modest resources, can make the real difference between whether or not we can really drill down on these issues. And I know that part of the work that the Trafficking in Persons Council has been doing is trying to figure out how enforcement and the resources that come from enforcement can then inure to the benefit of prevention and intervention. So I think it's time that we address some of those issues. I think that we can perhaps have an opportunity to address them through recommendations of this task force, because those issues will not only inure to the benefit of the current conversation, but also to trafficking and exploitation throughout. So thank you for that question, Emily. And Emily, I know you had a final question as we come upon the hour.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's actually right along these lines of resources. One of the things that I was really interested in when I was doing some reporting on this was how there's already a mechanism in place to collect fines and penalties from individuals who are engaged in soliciting prostitution or promoting prostitution. However, these fines are rarely collected by prosecutors. And your 2018 report contained data to that effect, showing that prosecutors only collected these fines in 6 of 28 cases, which also shows you the low level of convictions for these type of crimes, but also the rarity of collecting a fine. And Senate President Martin Looney in February said that he wanted more of an emphasis on collecting these penalties so that funds could flow to investigations and supporting victims. I just wanted to follow up with you, since your 2018 report, if you've seen any improvement on this front with regards to prosecutors imposing these fines that then go to human trafficking investigation.
Thank you. I wonder if our first responders on the line can respond to that. My sense, Emily, is that we've not seen an uptick in the collection. We've not seen any appreciable change in that pattern. And really because convictions, the trajectory of convictions need to be matched with the conviction that we're going to do this and the conviction that it really matters. And I think we understand from an observer's perspective that this is important, but a lot of these questions and decisions that we need to make on the about the fact that people are being vulnerated, that it does matter to address the demand, to have these penalties mean something, and to track the data so that we can continue to drill down on this work. Those decisions have not been doubled down on. And I think that that's going to be the work of this task force, is really to ask those questions moving forward. And so I'm already seeing the path. Our next meeting for this trafficking, for this task force of the Trafficking in Persons Council focusing on illicit massage business, is in August, on August the 25th at the same time. Again, we will be focusing, to my mind, we're going to be strategizing around focusing around the labor trafficking violations, the sex trafficking violations, and also the enforcement component of this. How do we track? How do we ensure that the penalties are meaningful, that the support is fulsome, and that we can actually help liberate people from this exploitation. Liz, I want to give you or Nikki the last word, because I think it's critically important that throughout this conversation, the industry be with us at the table. You have expressed not only a generosity in terms of your care for this issue, but also a generosity in being here with us today, helping us understand the perspective of an industry that is and should be very well respected in the state of Connecticut. So we want to have you back, and we want to have you give us the last word.
Thank you. I'm so incredibly proud of my graduates that are out there and working every day and doing the right things, and they deserve the best too, and to have a great industry, and they really want to be part of the solution to this. So use us, use the estheticians, use the nail technicians, use the massage therapists, because we want to be part of this. We want to be part of the change. And that education part of it, I think, is one of the most important parts of all of this, and getting people to be aware of what the problem is. Because again, people just aren't aware at the level that this is happening, but also how they can help.
Thank you so much, Liz. And thank you, a very special thank you to our panelists today. Robert, for your national expertise, and Marie, just for your empathic care and direction. Both Courtney and Ron, for your wonderful service to the state of Connecticut in not only enforcing the laws, but doing so in a way where you bring heart and conviction to ending the scourge of human trafficking. And again, Liz, just for your caring and thoughtful leadership in this industry. And of course, our co-chairs. It is your energy, I think, that not only brought us here today. Jillian, you are a storied leader in this regard. Robin, I know that your care for workers in the state of Connecticut runs very deep. And through the two of you, I think we're going to make some inroads here. Thank you so much for today's conversation. And we look forward to continuing the conversation and the work of this task force. Have a good afternoon, everybody.